Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really interesting collection submitted by one of you.
Hmm.
It's focused on a pretty significant moment, a protest in Washington, D.C. against a proposed government bailout.
Right, for the auto manufacturing industry. We've got a couple of sources here.
Yeah, there's a news report that kind of puts us right there on the ground,
Hmm.
captures the feeling.
And then there's a follow-up discussion piece that starts to unpack the arguments and the language used.
Exactly. So, our mission today is really to get under the surface. What were the main arguments for and against?
And what was really driving those protesters? What were the underlying feelings?
And hopefully pull out some key insights for you about the bigger economic and social stuff going on.
It's a classic tension, isn't it? Economic stability versus accountability.
Hmm.
I'm here to help connect these sources to some of those broader ideas.
Great. And for you, the learner, our aim is to give you a clear path through this. It's a complex debate.
Yeah, but we want to make it understandable, point out those aha moments without getting bogged down in jargon.
Okay, ready to dive in. Let's set the scene first.
All right. So the first source, this Action 5 News report from D.C., it just throws you right in, describes a protest, calls it thousands of angry citizens. So right away, you get a sense of scale. This wasn't small.
No, clearly a lot of strong feeling there. And the report's specific. The anger was directed at the proposed bailout of the auto manufacturing industry. Very targeted.
And crucially, the reporter, Sarah O'Connell, she actually talks to a protester, gets their side of the story directly.
And that interview, wow, it really tells you a lot. The protester immediately says they feel it's an injustice.
That's a powerful word, isn't it? It
Yeah.
signals more than just disagreement. It's like a moral objection.
Absolutely. And they go on to explain, mentioning concerns about the financial irresponsibility of big business.
Right, so there's this feeling that, these companies messed up, maybe took too many risks or weren't managed well.
And now the taxpayer's being asked to, well, to foot the bill. That seems to be the core issue.
They object to the government spending our tax dollars like this. And the trigger, that specific figure, $25 billion proposed for the auto industry.
That's a huge amount of money. You can see why people would react strongly to their tax dollars being used that way.
Definitely. And the protester really hammers the point home. They call these companies that have been mismanaged and are now nearly bankrupt.
Bankrupt meaning they just can't pay their debts. It shows how serious the situation was, and mismanaged keeps coming up.
It does. And then there's that really vivid detail the protester uses to illustrate the point.
Oh, the private jets?
Yeah. CEOs making millions, then having the nerve to fly to Washington in private jets
Costing hundreds of thousands of dollars.
while asking for a bailout. That image just screams hypocrisy to a lot of people.
It really captures that sense of disconnect, doesn't it, between leadership and the reality, or at least the perceived reality.
Hmm. But the news report, to its credit, it does bring in the other side of the argument.
Right, the potential fallout if the bailout doesn't happen.
Yeah, it mentions that many supporters of the bailout argue that it could help save the jobs of millions of hardworking Americans.
And that's the big counterpoint, isn't it? The human cost. We're not just talking about corporations. We're talking about people's livelihoods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shifts the focus dramatically. And interestingly, the protester interviewed, they actually acknowledge that.
They do.
Yeah, they say something like, that may be true, and I, for one, don't want to see anyone lose their job.
So it's not like they're completely ignoring the potential job losses.
No, it suggests they understand that consequence, but their objection to the bailout itself, maybe on principle or because of the perceived mismanagement, is just stronger.
It almost sounds like they're saying, yes, job losses are bad, but this bailout is still the wrong way to go.
Kind of. It touches on that idea of moral hazard, maybe. Like if you bail companies out, you just learn they can be irresponsible.
Yeah. That's a good point. Which actually leads us nicely into that second source, the follow-up discussion.
Right, where two people are sort of hashing this out further.
And one of them jumps right in, agreeing with the protesters, calls the bailout a bad idea.
Yeah, and they basically echo the same points. It's not fair for us as taxpayers to have to pay for the mismanagement.
And that the companies had so much debt and were making cars nobody really wants to buy, questioning the whole business model, really.
But the other person in that discussion, they push back a bit, right? Acknowledging those points, but
bringing it back to the jobs, the real worry about job losses. And not just in the factories.
that's key. They mentioned the suppliers, the whole network of companies connected to the auto industry. It's a huge ecosystem.
The ripple effect could be massive if those big companies go under.
Definitely. It highlights how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
So you weigh the cost of the bailout against the potential economic chaos of letting them fail.
It's tough calculation. But then the discussion introduces another angle.
The idea that maybe letting them fail isn't entirely bad.
Exactly. That maybe allowing a bankruptcy could force the other companies, the ones that survive, to manage themselves better, to streamline and become more efficient.
That's the creative destruction argument, essentially. Failure clears the way for stronger, leaner businesses. Painful in the short term, maybe, but healthier long term.
Potentially. It's the market correcting itself, some would say.
But then they bring up another layer, something less tangible.
The American car.
Yeah, the symbolic weight of it. It's not just an industry. It's tied up with ideas of prosperity and even American culture.
So letting it fail isn't just an economic decision. There's this cultural, almost emotional impact to consider, too.
Precisely. It taps into identity, history, a whole lot more than just balance sheets.
Okay, this is a good point to maybe clarify some of the key terms flying around. The source material actually helps with this.
Good idea. So protest, pretty straightforward. Gathering to show disagreement. That's what we saw.
And bankrupt. We mention it, having no more money to pay debts. The critical state these companies were in.
Then the core term, bailout. The government stepping in with emergency money for a failing company.
And those strong emotional words the protester used, injustice, meaning unfairness, and outrage, something morally wrong, really captures the feeling.
Definitely. We also saw breakout, like a protest has broken out, meaning it began suddenly. Spontaneous reaction.
And mismanaged, not managed properly. That was central to the protesters' argument.
And that great idiom, have the nerve to, meaning to dare to do something shocking or presumptuous.
Like flying in on a private jet to ask for taxpayer money.
Exactly like that. The language itself tells a story.
It really does. The source even touches on a bit of grammar, the difference between, say, a protest has broken out and a protest broke out.
Right. Subtle, but interesting. The present perfect has broken out. Kind of suggests it started recently and is still relevant now, maybe even ongoing.
Keeps it connected to the present moment.
Whereas the simple past broke out puts it more firmly in the past. Done. Finished.
A small difference, but it can shape how you perceive the timing and impact.
Yeah, language is funny like that. Okay, so pulling this all together as we wrap up.
What are the main things for you, the learner, to take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think the biggest thing is seeing that fundamental tension played out. The push-pull between saving the economy, saving jobs.
And holding businesses accountable, making sure there are consequences for, well, mismanagement or failure.
Exactly. The arguments against the bailout really leaned on that fairness to taxpayers angle and this idea that failure can actually be productive, forcing needed change.
While the arguments for it were all about the human cost, those millions of jobs, and the massive disruption if a whole industry collapses.
Plus that symbolic cultural weight we talked about. It's not just numbers.
And we saw how the language injustice, outrage wasn't just noise. It showed the deep ethical feelings tied up in these economic debates.
Absolutely. Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider.
When huge companies are on the brink of bankruptcy, what responsibility do they really have? Beyond their shareholders, I mean, to the public, to the economy.
And what's the government's role? Should it step in? Is a bailout sometimes a necessary evil to prevent something worse?
Or does it just end up rewarding failure, creating that moral hazard we mentioned, making future problems more likely?
These questions raised by this specific protest, they haven't gone away. They keep coming up in different industries, different crises. It's about stability, accountability, and who pays the price. Lots to think about there.